got some questions now for John. Sorry, we're talking about you when you were in the room. So now here's your chance to come back. I think when the committee visited the yard in February, I think that was myself and Jackie Dunbar went down and had a look around the yard and we saw what was going on. We were then somewhat taken aback by the change and your moving in. And then you gave some dates. In fact, you gave 4 dates which, for the delivery of the Glen Sannox, which were all missed. I'm trying to understand why they were missed, because that was the reason we were given as a Parliament for David Timon's departure, that he was continually missing dates. You then went to miss 4. Could you enlighten us to why that happened, John?
Well, the complexity of the ship became more apparent as you went deeper into it, and I think we gave too much credence to the sea trials on the February date. The sea trials on the February date were actually just a way of demonstrating one fuel system operating. The other system hadn't even been installed yet, and as we know, we had complexities with that. I don't think anybody, including our partners, CMAL and CalMac, had the experience of LNG and the installation and the operation of it. The installation of it was far more complex than people thought, and even in the end, we had to hire private contractors to help us with watchkeeping. So there are people with experience in this area are very, very thin on the ground. They still are very, very thin on the ground. So when the ship operates, they're going to have to get more people trained in it. And we helped our partners get people trained such that they can take fuel on. The last delay was caused by the anchor not passing the relevant examination by MCA. It was noted that it had been done in the February trials, but it turned out it hadn't been done. The anchors had been lowered, but they hadn't been signed off. So this promulgated as having to get new parts and pieces to do it.
So I'm unclear what you mean by lowered but not signed off. Did they hit the bottom of the sea and did they work? Or is it because somebody hadn't been in there to say that they'd seen it? I don't understand that. Could you just explain that?
Surely. I sometimes forget that not everybody's in shipbuilding.
Well, I've been doing the ferries for 8 years. I've got most of the ferry jargon, but not quite all of it.
So there's a thing called a gypsy, and basically it's a mechanism that connects to the anchor as it's lowering, so the anchor just doesn't free fall down. So just to explain to the committee, the anchors here are slightly different from what we recognise as anchors. They're actually a safety mechanism. They're not put down to harbour the boat in the far end of the Clyde. So they're a safety mechanism. So if you don't have that safety mechanism, the ship can't sail. So one of the anchors was slipping, and it was going down. So we could get it down, but we weren't sure we could get it back up again a second time. And the CMAL were concerned, the governing body was concerned, so we did modifications to that apparatus to make it work. And a permanent solution is on its way with, I call it Gypsy, the new Gypsies. So a permanent solution will be in there in the coming weeks.
So the ferry's been handed over without a permanent solution?
Without a permanent solution, yes, but a safe solution. It's signed off by MCA and it's signed off by Lloyds and it's agreed by CMAL.
Okay, so I've got two reasons, LNG and the anchor. There were 4 delays. Yeah.
Well, the LNG goes through all of them, to be frank with you. The LNG goes through all of them. It took us a considerable amount of time to get the LNG finally passed, and the last piece took about 3, maybe 4 weeks. And what it was a minute little bubble in one of the welds from the previous subcontractor that hadn't been looked at. We thought it had, but it hadn't. And this piping, and I'm using my hands, but this piping is a double-walled piping, so that the actual liquid goes through the inside wall. Then it's got a vapour that goes around it that keeps it cold. So if you have a fault there, you have to take this back off again and start again. So that's what promulgated. So the LNG was a string through three of the delays.
So your life would have been made easier if your predecessor's offer of making the vessels available without LNG had been accepted. Is that right?
Or if we'd have installed the LNG in the proper timing.
Okay. Kevin, I think you wanted, and I'd like to ask some further questions afterwards. Kevin.
Again, I think there's an understanding about LNG being a new technology, and I've just heard what you've said about getting it right to begin with. But anchors are not new technology, so why is it the case that the anchor mechanisms have to be looked at once again?
Well, they were bought 7 years ago, so I wasn't here 7 years ago. So 7 years ago, obviously, the proper QC, QA procedures weren't put in place.
So when did you become aware that this wasn't the right kit? When
it was sitting across my Esplanade in Greenock and they lowered it, and I got a report back that it hadn't passed.
Why did none of your predecessors recognise that this wasn't the right kit? Maybe Mr. Miller can answer that as a chair.
I can't speak for my predecessors. I can only speak for the items that happened in my watch.
Maybe Mr. Miller can talk about some of the predecessors.
The process of clearing something, you know, we are the shipbuilder, but there's a regulator, the MCA, who has oversight, and also Lloyd's List of oversight as well. You know, clearly some things are tried and tested, some things are tried and tested in front of the regulator, and they don't work, and therefore we've got to go back a little bit and correct. But most of the issues were, as John said, surrounded LNG, which...
So we've dealt with LNG. I'm asking about a very simple and basic thing, which is an anchor system, which is not a new technology. And for what I'm trying to get
it's not.
At
the point I'm making
why is it that that was wrong?
The point I'm making is the anchor was used and there was no issues, and then with oversight of the MCA, when the anchor was used, when it was out in sea trials, there was the problem with that piece of kit. So
you're saying the item was used and there were no issues, and yet it wasn't signed off at that particular point in time for whatever reason, as Mr. Petticrew has just said. Why is it that it took to another point to recognise that this anchor equipment wasn't the right stuff? I mean, I'm the grandson of a shipbuilder, but I wouldn't proclaim to know a huge amount about shipbuilding. But what I would say is that anchoring is a pretty old technology. How can you get that wrong?
Do you want me to answer?
When you go.
So, to go back to my answer, it was shown to have been signed off in February in the February sea trials. When I went to my counterpart in CMAL, he said yes, it had been dropped, but it hadn't been signed off, so he would like to see it dropped again. And when it was dropped again, the coupling didn't function the way it was supposed to function. When we checked the drawings and we checked the technical data, all the technical data that we received said it should have worked. When we went down and did some measurements on vital parts, the measurements that were there didn't match the drawings that were provided.
So we have the complications of the LNG, but we also have the complications of not getting a simplistic system right as well. Would that be correct?
Well, if that's your opinion, yes.
Would you say that an anchoring system is quite a simplistic technology?
Yes, and came as big a surprise as I was surprised as anybody, the fact that we had the issues that we had. And it was very, very disappointing that in February it hadn't been signed off, or it hadn't been indicated that we had this issue.
So in which case you would share my opinion then?
I would partially share it, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just going on along the lines that about delays, Glen Rosa, 802? When is that still on target? When's the target date for that?
September next year.
And the parts you have taken off the Glen Rosa to build the Glen Sannox that we heard about, is that going to delay that?
No.
So
in the case of the gypsies, we've ordered 4 gypsies. So as the committee member indicated there, we now know that that one will not work on the Glen Rosa, so it will be fixed at the same time as, or in and around the same time as the Glen Sannox will be fixed. And any issues similar to that will be fixed.
So were the control panels taken off the Glen Rosa as well, or was it just the anchor bits that were taken
There's
off?
been various pieces taken off. It was easier to get, you know, the long lead items, it was easier to take something off the Glen Rosa, but I believe it's been documented what we took off. And if I can maybe step forward, one of the things that we are doing, we'll be doing in the coming weeks, will be lessons learned sessions. I don't mean an hour or 2 hours, I mean days. And our sponsor has offered us a facilitator to sit down with us, look at objectives and what we were trying to achieve. And everybody will be involved in those lessons learned, not just Ferguson employees. We'll have Lloyds there, we'll have CMAL there, we'll have CalMac there, and they will have their input on the lessons that have been learned over the last 7 years.
Okay, hold on. Douglas wanted in first to follow up on the anchor, then I'll come to the Deputy Convener, and then we'll see where we go.
Thank you, Convener. And it's just really a brief follow-up on the anchor issue. Was that a warranty issue or was that a design issue? What was
It was a design issue.
Design. So there was no need to go back on. It was just.
No, it was a design issue.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Convener, Michael.
Just on the issue of 208 in the timeline of September 2025 that you provided, what's your degree of confidence in that timeline?
If I'm being completely frank here, about 90%. There has been some impact in the people being seconded to Ship 1, and I don't mean the workforce. I mean like engineering. We don't have a vast engineering department. Like for instance, a couple of them, on the electrical side, we have 2. So we've really got to put our shoulders to the grindstone and get it. And one of the things we haven't done in Ferguson is the utilisation of other shifts, like putting full shifts, full second shifts, back shifts on. That will be done. That will be done shortly. We've just appointed a night shift manager, which we've never had before, and we'll be putting people on night shifts. So things like electrical cable pulling, which you need people out the road, not in your way to try and do it. We'll put things like that on, and that's what the plan is setting out to do.